right, so we have everyone now. I'm going to ask you all if you could just give us a short bio on yourselves so the audience will know who you are and what you do. And we'll start with Mike.
Thanks, Rick. I'm Mike Kunz. I'm a principal at Maugel DeStefano Architects, and I lead the industrial and commercial business for the firm. Maugel DeStefano has been around close to 30 years now. We have 40 people and 2 offices, one in Harvard, Mass, and then one in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. We have a broad range of clients that span the industrial, lab, life science, and advanced technology, and the healthcare and housing sectors. We've been designing industrial facilities throughout New England for about 20 years. We particularly have expertise in designing mixed-use industrial parks, warehouses, distribution centers, and manufacturing facilities for the industrial and life science market.
Great, thanks, Mike. And now I'll move on to Karla King of AEI Consultants.
Thanks, Rick. Karla King. I'm the Executive Vice President of Sustainability and Resiliency at AEI Consultants. We are celebrating our 30th anniversary actually this year, and we are a national firm, originally starting with just providing due diligence services, but now essentially provide the wide range of environmental consulting services for our clients throughout the country. And I'm specifically based out of our Boston, Massachusetts office. And our services have evolved from, the traditional environmental site assessment, property condition assessment, seismic into zoning and ALTA surveys, as well as industrial hygiene, asbestos, lead, radon, mold. And then I have a particular focus on how sustainability and resiliency are impacting our clients and their properties. So we work with a wide range of industrial clients as it relates to energy, sustainability, beyond just the due diligence services that we also provide. So thanks so much, Rick, for having me.
Thank you, Karla. And now we'll move on to Dskinner of the Stubblebine Company.
Yeah, thanks, Rick. Yeah, good morning, everybody. So my name is Dskinner. Our office is in Lexington. We are a industrial commercial real estate agency, and our niche is large industrial and adaptive reuse. So I'm a associate broker at the company, and I spend most of my time in the inside 128, in and around Boston, the industrial areas, and we've done a lot of these industrial to life science redevelopments. Our firm, we have 15 agents, and we think done transaction in every New England state within the last 24 months, I think. So we really focus on large industrial, but we will drive. And so we do sales and leasing. And if it's a warehouse, we're great. And if it's not a warehouse, we stick to warehouses.
Well, you're even better if it's not a warehouse. Okay, well, we're going to move on to Ryan. Ryan Demadis is with Northmarq.
Yeah, good afternoon, or sorry for the technical difficulties this morning, Rick. Computer seems to be failing me, and my wife is at home 9 months pregnant, so we had a doctor's appointment this morning. So I was rushing around all morning. Yeah, Ryan Demadis, Northmarq Capital, been with the firm for 9 years now in the Boston-based office. We're the largest privately brokerage company in the country. Bulk of our business, or my business, is in industrial. Do a little bit of multifamily here, but obviously, it's been the asset class of choice amongst lenders in the last probably 4 or 5 years. So it's been a primary focus for us out of this office. I work with Boston-based clients, but cover mostly New England. I'd say 70-75% of our surrounding market is Boston, and industrial world that's typically on the 495 beltway. So happy to be here, and thanks.
Well, thank you, Ryan, and congratulations. Before we move on, I just want to mention our sponsors, and then we can start the questions for the panel. I want to thank Maugel DeStefano Architects, Inspired Technology, Northmarq, and also US Pavement are all our sponsors. And I should also mention their annual sponsors. So they sponsor all of our events throughout the year. So right now, I want to move on to Ryan because his wife is 9 months pregnant and we never know when he might have to jump off the call. So why don't we start with you first, Ryan? Provide us, and this is an important question as well, because right now, with especially after what happened yesterday in the stock market and all that, please provide us with an update on the current capital markets conditions. How are lenders viewing industrial real estate in today's market?
Yes. So that changes daily, it seems. But in terms of the asset class, it's still top of everyone's list. In particular, New England national lenders that we deal with, they probably have underexposure in industrial in Boston in particular, and in being one of the top MSAs, in the country in terms of commercial real estate, desire to continue to lend on that asset class. I'd say probably what everyone cares about is where interest rates are going in terms of what lenders are willing to do. So lenders are more than willing to put money out, but it seems that rates, have been bouncing around, probably starting around April or May or this year. I'm sure David will allude to what the impact on the sales side of those assets has been, and if there's been any repricing in terms of cap rate movement. But rates today for 5 and 10 year money are pretty consistent. We were into end of last year doing a lot of fixed rate financing, 10 plus years out to 20, 25 year deals, just because rates were historically low. Now we're seeing such a flat yield curve that, we're probably doing more in 5 and 7 year deals, to a rate that they think is going to come down in the short term. But, still very, just in terms of lenders, industrial is still an asset class that they want exposure in, and they're still more than willing to lend on. It's just we're seeing sizing come down and LTVs come down as interest rates impact debt service coverage ratios. So we'll continue to see lenders being aggressive, and as aggressive as they can. It's still their most aggressively priced product. But rates are, have been into the 5% range for the better part of the last 3-4 months. And, we're starting to see some quotes on more tertiary deals come in the 6s for 5 to 10 year fixed rate deals. So a little volatile, but still willing to put it out. And, as the push towards the end of the year comes, you'll see lenders, some are full up and, don't need to necessarily put more dollars out the door, and others are going to be, a little bit more aggressive to try and hit their targets for 2022. So we anticipate a strong year-end push out of the summer, and, industrial still top of the list as far as asset classes that they're willing to lend on. So.
You're muted, Rick.
Okay, you probably can hear me better now, huh? You don't see anyone kind of shying away yet from borrowing?
In terms of borrowing, no. I mean, I think that there's still certainly a lack of supply in this market, especially, for big bulk warehouse. And I think David will probably touch on that more, but there's, certainly demand in a lot of users in the varying markets surrounding Boston. COVID sort of reshuffled, the end node of Boston to becoming more of a distribution and last mile hub. And certainly by household, probably 4 to 5 daily. So, these users need to be where they're shipping and getting their goods out. And, it's just a matter of bringing enough new supply to the. Saw that in lack of Class A buildings, and then the Class B market is basically all around Boston. It's sub 5%. So our clients are very aggressive in the asset class, still trying to bring more supply to the market, revamping some of the older 1970s to 1990s or 2000s buildings. What the requirements are for some of those users out there looking for space.
Okay, yeah, you kind of cut in and out, but we were kind of putting in our own words for what we missed the Oz. So, that's a perfect lead into for David, because David and Ryan, you probably work hand in hand together with a lot of deals, I'm sure. if not with Ryan, I'm sure with other lenders. So Ryan, I'm sorry, David, what are some of the biggest surprises you have seen in the industrial world since COVID changed buying and selling patterns?
Yeah, is my mic working here?
Yep.
Great, okay. Yeah, it was, I'm sure for everyone, nobody knew how to react when all that was going on or when it all started. And, you know, over the last couple of years, I think keeping up with press releases, you know, we're seeing record-setting prices in especially the 93 area, place, obviously Boston, Medford, even Woburn. These price per square foot are going kind of crazy. And then even down Route 24, we'll see some of these deals where they trade hands 2 or 3 times within a couple of years, just because you get a new tenant at a record high rental rate and someone's willing to pay because the interest rates have been so low, they're willing to pay. You know, if they're paying 3% on an interest rate, they can buy it at a 5 cap and still make some money. So I mean, as I look through these press releases, different, you know, news, the obviously New England Real Estate Journal, the different business journals, and seems like everything's been saying the same thing though for the last few years, that the market fundamentals haven't actually seemed to say that we would slow down much even through COVID, and some of those market fundamentals being things like just basic supply and demand. So even with things like the housing shortages around Boston, within 128, around 128, inside 128, that's been driving all these big pricing for the land redevelopments and the industrial to residential or industrial to life science conversions, which is taking off the industrial supply off the market. So even with, you know, the interest rates going up over the last few months, there's still not a lot of warehouses or manufacturing sites because they're getting turned into something else. And my thought would be that I probably won't see them go back to what they were in our lifetimes, I would think. So yeah, and then with e-commerce taking off in the 2010s, and then the cannabis revolution that happened over the last few years, we knew industrial was going to do really well. We didn't expect it to go so well especially during COVID. Yet, you know, here we are where now people would rather buy warehouses than apartments at times, which is kind of nuts.
So, so there's a great demand still for warehouse space.
Yeah, and I mean, there definitely seems to be, I think, but a big part of that is even if the demand even tapers slightly, the supply is also tapering. So the actual the effect on the market hasn't changed like it would when demand might slow at some other time.
So let me ask you this question. You might not know the answer to it, but I'm going to ask it anyways. With the Amazon distribution centers, they're starting to close up some of their major warehouses or distribution centers. Is that, you think that's going to, I don't know how many they're going to close up in the area, but I know it's a few. Do you think that's going to be something that's going to happen with some other distribution centers as well?
I can only imagine that it would. I know that I saw a couple press releases, I think a week ago or so, where in other parts of the country, I think they had successfully subleased over, I want to say over 1 million square feet. And from what I know around here in New England, especially Boston, I don't really see that exactly happening. What I do know is that they pulled out of some pretty big development deals. So they didn't get to the point where they built it yet, but they were out of, there was a huge one in Southern New Hampshire that they backed out of. And then Central Mass, there was another couple really big ones that are not happening anymore. So I can imagine that if that's happening with them, that will happen with other people. I think it's probably most in a most pronounced way happening with them just because of how quickly they expanded.
So they're not holding on to the space, they're subleasing it.
And yeah, I mean, I think we've all probably seen a lot of the same articles about that, but at the beginning, I thought it was something like 10 million square feet. And then I saw something more recently that said the number was maybe pushing closer to 30 million. But I know they're being pretty quiet. We've had some conversations with them on some deals that we've done around the city, and they are really sensitive to letting people know that, you know, it isn't in fact an Amazon warehouse if it's not clear, because they don't obviously want people to know about that. But it, you know, it's certainly happening.
Well, I think that that's a little too late, because I think it's been in almost every newspaper and news
Yeah, right.
cast that's been out there. So everyone seems to know about it.
Yeah, and I think, Rick, I want to say they bought up too many properties too fast while they were waiting for these mega warehouses to take off and be built. And now that they have the mega warehouse, they don't need these smaller spaces. 600,000 square feet. Now they don't need the 100,000. So I think that's one thing that they did, and they were trying to get ahead of the supply chain and buy up everything, and then realize, whoa, we bought too much. So now they're trying to retract on that. So
Yeah, well, I don't know. I know they closed the one in Randolph, but they were also in the process of building one in Revere. I think it was Revere or Saugus. It was the old cinema there. I mean, it's enormous.
Yeah, it's Revere. I think it's Revere. Yeah.
Yeah, and I thought it was a spaceship that landed there. It looked like very futuristic. I'm not sure what they're doing with that yet, though. Is that going through? Do you know? No.
Yeah.
not sure.
Well, I can't believe that they wouldn't complete that one, because it's a kind of a perfect location for what they do, right on the highway, and it's big enough.
Yeah, they have they have the old NECO building, where I think a lot of people knew about that, but then they're also finishing construction on, I want to say 200,000 square feet in Everett, right where the old Boston Market Terminal was off of 2nd Street. That was a pretty big project, and that is coming online. And that was a huge lease. I think $40 a foot. Paid for that.
Well, that'll be interesting to see what happens there. Let's move on to Mike. Mike, Maugel DeStefano has been very active in the industrial space. What areas of the market are you seeing the most activity in today?
Well, three different areas. I think, we'll continue to see the demand for online shopping and warehouse and last mile distribution, and companies trying to get ahead of any supply chain issues, along with this whole thing of trying to same day delivery. I know there's a small percentage of companies that do it, Amazon being one of them. I ordered a book, it came the same day. So, and I think a lot of other companies are looking to do the same thing. So and we see it in Blue Star down in Norton, some big retailers, Home Depot, Pitney Bowes, and Wayfair all put in some last mile distribution there. And then in phase 2, there's another company going in there that's looking for 200,000 square feet just for warehouse, because they can't keep up with the product demand. Companies are also looking to move outside of Boston. Our biggest client is putting up a couple buildings in Windsor, Connecticut, down there, Baker Hollow Industrial Park, and then manufacturing. Companies are looking to move their manufacturing to stateside, so they do not run into problems with supply chain issues. We have a couple clients from China and Europe that are trying to build some manufacturing over here to keep up with the demand and not have any downtime from ships being left out in the ocean for an extended period of time.
Do you think that's, you say China, I mean, with all the issues that are going on there, you think that they'll bring more of their manufacturing to this country? Have you seen a lot of that?
A little bit, and a lot of it came from the previous president putting a lot of tariffs on goods from China. So we had a couple clients that were like, okay, we're going to build here because it's too expensive to build over there. And with fuel charges and fuel prices going up, it just makes sense. It's got to be cheaper to build it here.
That's interesting. So that means we might start seeing more manufacturing coming back into the United States.
Yeah, that's a hope.
Yeah, and that's probably due to the pandemic as well, because of supply chain shortages.
Yeah.
I would think. I would like to see that with some of the construction goods. I haven't heard much of the manufacturers for construction goods opening up around this country.
Well, they should.
Hmm?
They should.
I agree.
I mean, back in the 70s, they had all those paper mills and lumber mills, and just that's what they need to bring back.
Yeah, well, we used to have a lot in Western Mass. There used to be a lot of paper mills and I think lumber mills as well.
Yeah.
But things change, and we have no control over it.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's move on to Karla. So Karla, for individual clients with portfolios of assets, what would you recommend as a good first step in determining their risk or opportunities as it relates to sustainability and resiliency? You threw in all those big words, like, they're tough for me.
No, they're not big or hard words. And I think sometimes they're a little overwhelming. And really, I see, instead of the word sustainability and resiliency, we can just talk about risk and opportunity. So we're working with a lot of our clients. And again, it depends on the organization's drivers. Are there stakeholders who, are investors who have specific ESG objectives? These are all things that need to be taken into consideration as part of the first step. But two easy first steps are really benchmarking the portfolio from an energy and water standpoint. Waste is another area that can be included if relevant to the particular industrial processes. And the second is running a climate risk portfolio analysis. These are two, easy analysis assessments that can be done as a desktop exercise. So it's not a huge investment. And, really the biggest challenge that we see and work with our clients, work through the process is, making sure they can collect all of the utility data. That's really sometimes the hardest exercise, is making sure you're obtaining all that information. But this, essentially gives them a kind of a big picture look at their portfolio from an energy use, water use, and then climate risk, which allows them to kind of put their whole portfolio into a matrix to understand, their priorities and opportunities. So what are the highest energy users? What are the highest water users? Which properties are subject to the most, climate risk, extreme storm events? Are X, Y, and Z properties subject to flooding? And then they can go from there to prioritize going into kind of a deeper dive for the ones that are identified in that benchmark analysis. So then they could do things such as an energy audit at a property that is a significant energy consumer. They're based on the square footage or how it relates to the other assets, or, as it relates to similar assets within the industry. And then on the climate side, going deeper into doing a, site-specific kind of property resiliency assessment to say, hey, if this is subject to particular property or subject to a particular natural hazard, what are things that we can do to protect it from that, to ensure that the industrial operation would continue in the event of an extreme storm event? How can we mitigate downtime for that property?
So sustainability, especially in current times, we're seeing some changes to a lot of the new construction.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something that you're seeing more of today than it was 10 years ago, that is making a big dent in how that facility operates?
Yep. Yeah. And I'm sure Mike sees it on the design side. And, you talked about actually access to paper mills and lumber mills and things like that. That is actually, one of the criteria that they look at is where the materials are coming from as it relates to the project site. So an interest, good tie-in to that conversation. But yes, that's absolutely a component that's being taken into consideration during design. And I think LEED has been around for a very long time, and people have been, building LEED buildings, particularly here in the Northeast, and I'd say like West Coast. Those are, very high priority. Life sciences is huge in that space. But I think what kind of the ESG and sustainability, where it's evolving, is not just during design, but also taking in consideration operations and making sure you have transparency during operations and access to information. I kind of see the world evolving into the futuristic world of sustainability, as folks can have a dashboard that at any given time they can kind of see their carbon footprint or their water footprint. And so really it's making sure people have access to data, and technology is obviously playing a role in that. Access to data, so then they can be responsive to that data and make adjustments or changes as needed. So there is definitely an evolution both on the design side, but then it's continuing into that operational, and how critical it is during operations to keep monitoring, metering, and tracking usage, and understanding what your building is doing at any given moment. I kind of relate it to where technology has evolved to like fitness and watches. That's really where this is kind of sustainability and is going. Access to information on how things are performing, and where your health of your building is. So that is really the evolution that I see happening now more than it has in the past.
Yeah, and I think with sustainability, solar on the roofs are becoming, more people. It used to be, oh yeah, building code dictated that the roof could handle the solar panels, and now people are actually, okay, getting some tax benefit from the government. Let's really start to do it. And I think the technology of the solar panels has come a long way to where it makes sense, and you can get your money back, your ROI on the product much faster.
Absolutely. Mike's stealing my thunder on another question, but that's absolutely another big, no. It's another big area that we're seeing. A lot of clients are working and requesting from us to kind of do a portfolio-wide solar feasibility. So that's absolutely, especially with these industrial spaces where it's a huge rooftop, they're good candidates for solar, even huge parking lots, depending on region and location. But the industrial sites do tend to be great candidates for solar. So that is another component that we're starting to see as it relates to that.
Well, that brings up a topic of the challenges of utilities nowadays for a lot of properties. I mean, I know they're all struggling to try to get, and during the pandemic, it was kind of a nightmare because they couldn't even get the utilities to come out and work on that because of COVID. So how do you suggest someone deal with that challenge right now? Because
you dealing with utilities and getting access to, is that essentially your question?
In some cases, there's not enough, not enough power, not enough water coming into the area for them to operate.
Yeah, that's where I really just obviously recommending. So when you benchmark, and if you're having issues, especially if you're having issues with enough power and enough water, in a world where we're starting to see drought. I mean, I know here in Massachusetts, we're in critical drought condition. Last year, we were also similarly. So where water is critical to the industrial operation, and obviously keeping properties cool during hot days is also critical, especially for certain industrial operations. How important it is to understand where you are today, and are there opportunities within the building to reduce your use of energy and reduce your use of water, right? Unused energy and unused water is the cheapest. So looking at the property and reducing the demand that your property needs. So doing an energy audit at your property, evaluating all of the, everything from lighting to occupancy sensors to obviously HVAC equipment, all of the big users of, energy and or water, and identifying some of the efficiency measures that can happen. So then you're reducing at least your demand. Then you can also look at renewable energy and alternative sources of energy, so that if you are having issues of getting a certain amount of power from the grid, you have alternatives that can supplement your demand, either because your property is increasing its operations or just, as a result of industrial demand.
So Mike, that brings you into this whole picture, because is it been challenging for designing properties and repurposing properties when you don't have those utilities that you need?
Yeah, you have a lot more pump stations, a lot more just trying to get any electrical or national grid gas or anybody coming to come out and increase that. We have a client that uses gas fired furnaces, but now they have to go to propane when they do an expansion, and the cost of that propane. So it makes some locations difficult. You have to look at different ideas, and if you're going to put solar on the roof, why not go with electric heat pumps in the warehouse and in the office? So it creates a challenge, but you can also try to design the building and other utilities, alternative methods to navigate that challenge.
So that brings me back to David and Ryan, because when now David, you must have a lot of clients that have realized they are going to be dealing with that situation. Is that something that you have to now work into your due diligence of finding properties for them?
It hasn't really affected us too much yet. I think we'll see it later than you guys would. We kind of are a little bit further down on the leasing side, for sure. It's downstream, definitely. On the development side, there's not a lot of there's not been a lot of development where that's been a huge concern, at least for the types of projects that were for larger things, especially further out in the suburbs. I haven't seen it as much.
Well, I think more the leasing side of things, you might find more people looking for ways that they can cut back on their energy costs, and they might need additional water supply and things like that, depending if it's a lab or a facility like that.
So yeah, so lab is definitely a different animal with that. We don't run into the groups that'll say that they need a lead building or something like that. I would say I was just working with DHL recently on something, and that was important to them. It's interesting though, because they all have businesses that have to function, and so especially the larger ones that have the more corporate initiatives, they'll all say from the outset, here's what we're looking for. And then the reality of there's nothing out there. And then they realize we will take all this into consideration for our next deal. I've been hearing that a lot, where they say, hey, if we can find it, great. But when there's 3 options within 15 miles that actually fit for the business, it doesn't, they reprioritize some things, which they would never probably want to proudly admit.
No.
And I think life sciences, to your point too, I think life sciences is further along as it relates to sustainability and resiliency, just in terms of priority. That they're looking for the lead building or want to go in that direction. And I'm sure, to David's point, like right now the demand is so intense that just finding something that fits the need, and this is something that can be solved over time. I think sometimes people get kind of overwhelmed by sustainability and resiliency. It's something that can get become part of their capital plan. at this point, when a certain piece of equipment hits end of useful life, we can upgrade it. I mean, obviously, if there's opportunity during design or if they're modifying a building, that's a great opportunity to do these upgrades and put in the energy efficient equipment, or, convert to certain types of, heat pumps, et cetera. But if they're not doing a massive renovation of the space, it can be something that's downstream rather than right up front during due diligence and when they're trying to acquire the property.
Great. Now, Ryan, I know that speaking with different energy suppliers and like solar companies, there's a lot of financing that they can get with either zero financing, 0% financing, or even grants that give, that will give the builder or the property owner the benefits, the tax benefits or a grant benefit. Do you run into that a lot?
Yeah, certainly on number of existing buildings with systems upgrades, there's ability to utilize some PACE loans to basically come in as higher leverage alternatives to upgrade all building systems with an eye on sustainability. And it's very beneficial, because if you're going to have to go in and make upgrades to the building anyway, it's a good way to attract some of those tenants that David's out with, and then they might be able to check a few more boxes than he might initially tell them they're able to. And then certainly on new spec construction, we get involved pretty early on in that, and before even our clients are working with their leasing brokers as they're going through the design phase, we'll get involved and kind of talk through and let them know whether or not they're going to come out of the ground on a spec basis or a design build, and basically being able to work with the likes of Mike and Karla to sort of design buildings that make the sense for the most amount of users out there looking for buildings. That's critically important when you're building a spec building. Especially when you're doing, 200,000 square feet plus. There's only so many users that are above that size looking in these various regions, and whether or not the building is going to be single tenant, multi-tenant, and how to break that up, and how to do it efficiently, and how to, fulfill the ESG needs of some of the tenants out in the marketplace, in addition to, just efficiencies of buildings being able to, draw down as much power, utilize as much water as they need to for whatever specific use they have. And users, as David can allude to, are out there looking for buildings on an immediate basis, but design builds on spec basis, or these construction sites in particular in Massachusetts, we're seeing 12 to 16 months from start to finish, from when they're first going in, either acquiring the land, going for approvals, and then the build times take anywhere from 9 to 15 months, depending on construction type of these warehouse and manufacturing buildings. So all the while trying to fulfill what demand is out there in the marketplace, it becomes critically important to try to check as many boxes as what the tenants are looking for. And that's why it's, important when you're doing buildings on a spec basis to try to, fit into as many tenants' needs as possible, so that you can, try to limit the number of tenants you do need to fulfill this space requirement of a new build. So.
Okay, great. Let's move on to another topic of discussion, which Mike, from design and development perspective, what are your clients looking for now, and have those requirements changed since the pandemic?
So they're looking, Ryan just said, a building that can be built fast, and what to utilize. How do we get the building up and going as fast as possible, because we need this warehouse space. So we've tried to utilize tilt-up concrete construction, which is where they pour the concrete right there, pour the walls, and then stand the walls up. You got to wait a little while, but after the walls are poured, you tilt up all the walls, and you have an exterior skin of the building in a week or so after you start putting up the walls. And then pre-purchasing items, rooftop units, the electrical components, switch gear, those kinds of things that people are looking to purchase before we even start construction drawings almost. They're just, all right, we ordered 6 units for the warehouse and we ordered all the switch gear. Now you have to design to these limitations.
Are you finding new technology that has helped you work on these projects even faster? Or work on the designs you come up with faster?
Well, just based on technology that we're using, Revit, I think is what we use, and we can design a warehouse building in a day or two. Just get what it's going to look like, what it's going to feel like, be able to walk in it, walk through it. So that technology has really helped us as a company develop projects faster. So there can be MEP guys can do some narratives and understand what's needs to take place, and then how to buy that before the final design is done.
Interesting. Okay. No, why don't we go back to Ryan? I'm just worried his wife's going to go into labor any minute, so I want to get all his questions out now. With high demands in industrial space and limited supply of existing inventory, what are your clients doing to try to bring new product to market? What financing products are available for new construction today?
Yeah, so doing everything they can to basically buy land where it's available, or buy existing product. Obviously, vacancy rates are at lows all across the board. My mic was in and out and a little testy, which is why I dialed in at the beginning. But in terms of Amazon sort of reshuffling, I think there's some context to that that's probably overhyped. But Amazon still has big needs for spaces. I think that as space became available, they took as much as they possibly could to fulfill what they needed, and then they can go back and reassess the best way to serve that logistically in regions like Boston. So while they're giving some space back, they're building other buildings. And if you look at probably across the board what their net growth is in any given region, I would say it's positive in the bulk and vast majority of them. They're probably just they're adding 800,000 square feet and cutting in other regions. So in terms of what new products are available from the debt side, the debt funds are still pretty active. The rates are a little bit more sensitive. So for clients that are looking to push up the capital stack, we're seeing lenders are still readily available to provide 75+% leverage. Regional banks, and then we work with a lot of life insurance companies. And again, with industrial, whether it's a spec build or build to suit projects, there's still demand for exposure in that asset class. So we're able to work with and leverage a lot of the strong banking and depository relationships in this region, certainly. But then in addition to that, we have a lot of national players that are looking to gain and garnish, and that's why they've gotten more into construction lending. So it's still readily available. And then using other components, whether it's PACE or some energy efficiency tax credits, all those things help to push the capital stack up higher. And again, all that is just on the guise of building product that is going to appeal to the bulk of tenants and users out there in the marketplace. So they're taking all that into consideration when they're designing these, and then we're out there and we've been able to place all new construction requests. So it's still a shortage in this market in particular, and we do a lot down into Connecticut and kind of all over New England, as long as it's a good hub and it's a very, very high demand and very well populated region that hasn't historically been known as an industrial market. So anything that our clients can do to deliver more product has been well received by the tenants, and it's certainly still being well received by the lenders out in the market today.
Oh, great. David, we're going to ask you to look into your crystal ball because do you believe pricing will come down from these historic high sale prices? And if so, how? And what most people want to know, when?
That's what everyone wants to know. When is it going to happen? The guys that I've met 5 years ago that said, oh yeah, I only buy a good deal. They've been calling, asking when are the deals coming, and they still call and they keep calling. And you'd think what goes up must come down. You would think that, I think some of the things that I'd mentioned before, just about how the fundamentals of supply and demand are kind of keeping prices higher, not necessarily for financial reasons, but more just because there's not much out there, so you got to pay it if you want to get it. But that being said, I think some of the product of the land craze, the buying craze, that people have just been buying land just to buy it. I think there's a couple million square feet out there inside 495, around and inside 495 for build-to-suits that are proposed. I think that's going to be delivered in the next couple of years, and we keep talking about Amazon. I don't know of any spaces in 120 around 128 where they're trying to get out of a lease necessarily, but with different, I don't know if I want to say a trend, but different events like that, I think eventually once these buildings get built, the rental rates are going to fall to just get a tenant in the building. And then tenants are going to be back in control more so of, especially the suburban leasing market. I think urban leasing is going to always be pretty tight, but I think suburban is going to change. And when that happens, when the tenants get back in control, the pricing kind of comes back to a stabilized area where, in a place like Stoughton on 24, you would have seen, in 2017, 2018, you would have seen, $6-7 rents. I did a deal in 2018, it was $6 triple net, and now that same space is 10 or 11 triple net, and which is like 20% a year increase, which is crazy. But when that kind of comes back to normal, then all of these pro formas that have been on steroids will come down to they'll start breaking, and then so the purchase prices won't work as well for a lot of the institutional guys, and then the sale prices are going to come back to a place where users are going to actually be able to get back in the game, because there's been a lot of guys that have said they've known that your local contractor maybe that wants to buy 20 up to maybe 50,000 square feet, they've been around for 30 years, and so they've seen, oh yeah, these buildings have been selling for 40 to 70 a foot for the last however long, 20, 30 years. And so they've just been keeping all of their cash in the bank waiting for this to happen. And then so they'll get back in the game when things get, normalized again. So I think it's, 12 to 18 months. I think it could be sooner. I really think it could be sooner that the sale prices are doing this, that the rental rates are going to be doing this. And I'd say, yeah, middle of next year, maybe.
So you don't think you're not calling it a crash, you're talking about a correction type of thing.
Yeah, I wasn't doing this in 2008, but I think crashes typically happen when you have some artificially pumped up market condition. Is that fair to say? Maybe not all the time, but maybe sometimes. I just don't think that's what's happening. But for Boston industrial, I
definitely don't think that's what's happening. I was just asking your opinion on it.
Yeah, I don't think it'll be a crash. I don't think it'll be a crash. What I have heard is a lot of the institutional buyers that were basically looking at a rent roll and saying, here's your low cap rate, here's here's an offer. A lot of those guys are just, the phrase they keep saying is, we're putting our pencils down just across the board, because it's so uncertain. You could get into a deal now, and in 60 days it's a totally different deal. So that's more so what I'm hearing on a regular basis.
Okay.
I'll jump in on that too. We're seeing a lot of acquisition deals that didn't happen in the last 3 months. There's certainly been a slowdown. I think part of that's what we're able to deliver as a mortgage lender in terms of interest rates. So the cap rates typically trail and lag that by 45 to 60 days, and any given market, just given that contracts and real estate takes time to transact. On the new construction stuff, on new buildings, Mike and you're seeing what cost of some of this is. It's on new product, the rents for new deliveries, there's not a lot of wiggle room on what those rents can be. I think a lot of what has been lifting the price on rental rates that David's seen in some of these older buildings has been that, you know, new product is probably in the mid to high teens now, just because the, you know, whether material costs, labor costs, land costs, et cetera, has sort of, you know, pushed that up. So if there's an existing building, Class B, that can be retrofitted with some systems and mechanical upgrades to sort of, you know, mimic a Class A building, but not be a Class B, but not be a Class A building, maybe, you know, less clear heights. You're not getting as much ability to stack higher. There's less efficiencies in, you know, docking and less dock doors and less trailer storage and less things that they're looking for now. You know, the rents have been pushed up in that Class B space just because there's nothing else available and out there. But I don't think landlords are at the point now where they're going to be delivering buildings and taking, you know, significant haircuts on what their expectations are for new buildings. You know, at least we're not seeing it. And, you know, there's still a lot of institutional players in this market that are putting enough dry powder in and equity in themselves that they can be patient and sort of wait it out. But, you know, we're not, until you see significant drops or you know, increases in vacancy rates, that's going to be more what dictates. And it's just, I think the cap rates on the investment sales are really where the number is. So the trades are going to start to reflect where the new norm is for interest rates. We're not doing deals in the high 2s and low 3s anymore. I mean, 4% came and went. We're probably closer to 5%. And when you're seeking, you know, returns, cash on cash returns and IRRs, you know, you're only able to pay a certain cap return. And, you know, rates, I think rental rates will probably remain fairly consistent, but it's what the return metrics are going to dictate where the sales price is. And, you know, that's certainly going to start to show in some of these cap rates. And, you know, there's definitely a shortage. You know, none of the statistics are out on recent trades, but from our perspective, there's been certainly much fewer deals trading hands. And, you know, it's probably going to be that way until, you know, sellers are at least educated as to where, you know, where the new normal is for, you know, what their, you know, sale price expectations are. And, you know, cap rates are probably just going to be starting to reflect where new interest rates are. So.
Okay, great. Well, I'm going to end with one last question to Karla, and then we have a few questions they'll go on to, and then we'll start some networking if anyone wants to stay on. For Karla, what are some of the key risks that industrial property owners and REITs should be thinking about over the next 5 years? Will this be incorporated into the due diligence process in the future?
Yep. Yeah, as mentioned earlier, I kind of see sustainability and resiliency as kind of risk mitigation in general. Not having a crystal ball, but I really see the biggest risk areas being like climate risk from extreme storm events, and then this whole topic of energy and water demand. So as it relates to climate risk, and especially tied back into that due diligence process, I've been involved with ASTM's developing a guidance document for the development of a property resiliency assessment. So similar to an environmental site assessment and property condition assessment, they're developing what will probably be referred to in our love for 3-letter acronyms in the environmental world as a PRA. And essentially the way it's mapping out, and it's just in draft form, but it's a 3-stage strategy that looks at, the first stage would look at the risks of the property as it relates to extreme natural hazards. So hurricane, flood, drought, extreme heat or cold, earthquake, etc. So really just identifying, hey, this particular asset property is subject to these, and giving them a rating of like high, you know, kind of a 5-point rating as it relates to those particular risks. Stage 2 then gets into the kind of boots on the ground portion where you're looking at the particular site vulnerabilities. So as a perfect example, if you have 2 assets and both are vulnerable or subject to the same natural hazard, the site visit and look at obviously as-built and existing conditions could reveal that you know, one property that's right next door to another property is more vulnerable based on, you know, some key building characteristics. A very simple example of that would be 2 properties that are subject to flooding, similar elevations, but one has some really critical equipment that is in the flood zone versus the other one has it either rooftop mounted, or they have some sort of flood barrier, or the equipment's raised accordingly based on the projected potential flooding. So that stage 2 looks at these kind of building specific characteristics as it relates to those you know, higher risk storm events. And then stage 3 is where, the consultants dive into recommendations on mitigation measures for decreasing the risk of these properties. So that's one aspect that is evolving in the due diligence process. So some folks, both on the lending and the equity side, are starting to request that as part of the due diligence. It's not a formalized or consistent. The intent, obviously, for ASTM is to develop kind of an industry standard. So there's some consistency in the deliverables from different providers. So folks are kind of using that. Some are just looking at the risks and not diving into the vulnerabilities or mitigation measures. They just want to kind of understand how their portfolio looks from a risk standpoint. But others are starting to go deeper. And as I mentioned earlier, incorporating like efficiency measures into their capital plan. You can start incorporating resiliency measures into your capital plan. If you're upgrading particular equipment, does it make sense to, include a flood barrier, or does it, include putting some sort of knee wall around equipment? So these are good things to start thinking about. And then energy and water demand, we talked about it a little bit already, but this is both a risk and an opportunity. It's a risk if a property is not really proactive at evaluating these and developing strategies, with obviously demand for energy efficient equipment. And, we have supply chain issues now. Just think about when everybody's cramming to try to be net zero and, change their infrastructure, or order solar panels, and kind of that demand. So thinking about it now, understanding, the existing asset, how it's benchmarks today, what are opportunities for evolving the property over time, and making sure that you aren't running into issues with energy or water demand. And then also obviously the compliance piece. We're obviously seeing regulations, particularly here in the Northeast in California, with BERDO here in Boston, and Local Law 97 in New York. And a lot of other regulations are starting to evolve with this objective of, properties going net zero. So making sure that they're compliant with those and not getting fined according to those by not doing the appropriate benchmarking or energy audits, or, retro commissioning that is required under those regulations.
Great.
So
I want to get to these last two questions that people have, because we actually ran out of time.
I was done, so it's perfect.
Okay. How often do you see transportation infrastructure limitations killing development opportunities? Which is a pretty good question. I don't know if anyone can give that answer, but
I don't know. Yeah, I saw that. I don't know what kind of infrastructure limitations.
well, I think they're talking about, not having the proper infrastructure would probably mean that, you don't have the highways or the accessibility to get to the properties, the right amount of accessibility, something like that. I don't know. Mike, you shaking your head.
I'm trying to think.
Mike, I don't know if you've run into anything down in Connecticut, but we're seeing a lot with traffic studies being done recently in terms of, with disturbance surrounding neighborhoods. A lot of these industrial areas are abutting residential neighborhoods, and I think that's the biggest component to distribution. But in terms of what the users and in terms of development, what they're looking for, they're going to be near the main arteries. They're going to be somewhere that can spill into 495, 128, or sort of the spokes of Boston. So there's not a ton of rail coming through Boston. There's not a huge demand for that, since we are sort of an end node. So it really is just being near the main arteries for trucking and truck use. But traffic studies are becoming something that's more and more looked upon, certainly in New England. I just bring that up, Mike. I know you said you had those two projects down in Windsor, but we dealt with some of that for one of our clients. There's a lot of, as you go in for building approvals, a lot of local municipalities are having more issues with the noise ordinance. And, when you have a 24-hour distribution facility that's nearby, just being able to be cognizant of what the traffic congestion is going to cause, because anyone who lives outside of Boston certainly knows that traffic is a major issue here. And, public transportation is probably 60 years outdated as well. So
We actually have public transportation. I wasn't aware of that.
When it's running.
When it's running, yeah. Yeah, no, and I've heard the same issue in Bellingham. They had the same issue where they have an industrial park there where the tenants were getting a lot of heat from the neighbors in the area because of that same issue.
Yeah,
And I
we've
can
had to
understand that.
redesign. Yeah, we've had to redesign buildings and move trash compactors to one side and put up some sound walls and fences for the neighbors and more trees and berms. So there's some things you have to do to keep the residential area happy.
Correct. One last question. Well, there's two last questions, but the third one I'm going to skip. To follow up on the sustainability with Karla and Mike, have there been any creative agreements on excess solar energy that buildings may generate, but is more than they need? Is it always only sold back to the energy market, or have there been any agreements with municipalities?
Yeah, I can chime in there. I mean, it depends on the location and the infrastructure as to if there's an opportunity for that power to go somewhere else. It typically, for that reason, it's, you know, kind of going back to that energy market. But I suspect this is going to continue to evolve, especially in light of the, you know, Inflation Reduction Act and all these incentives surrounding solar. And so if somebody's able to generate more than they need, you know, what's the best way to leverage that? One thing, while this isn't specifically industrial, it's in the data, you know, like the data, a lot of data centers are, you know, leveraging renewable energy and abutting next to renewable energy sources. So I think location is starting to get creative in terms of accessing renewable energy, who can generate, who's generating more and who needs more, because obviously data centers are huge energy hogs. But I can see that getting more creative over the next several years, and it being more than just a, you know, sell back to the energy market. I don't know, Mike, if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, I think once technology increases and being able to have smaller batteries and more powerful batteries, being able to hold them right at the building and being able to use that energy when it's cloudy or during the winter, but for most part, it's just going back to the utility that's in the area.
Great. Well, unfortunately, we ran over our time, which is not a bad thing because we have so much information. We could go on another half an hour if we wanted to. But I want to thank you all for speaking today. Thank you, Mike Kunz from Maugel DeStefano Architects, Karla King from AEI Consultants, David Skinner from the Stubblebine Company, and Ryan Demadis from Northmarq. I want to thank you all. I want to thank everyone for attending. If anyone wishes to stay on, we'll have a short networking session if anyone's interested. If not, I'll just go and have lunch. But, you know, everyone is welcome to stay on. I want to thank our sponsors for today, Maugel DeStefano Architects, Northmarq, US Pavement, and Inspired Technologies.